Okay, folks, this is Jason Van Tatenhove with Oath Keepers Media, and I'm working on a series of interviews talking about prepping for what's coming with this new election year. There's just everything that's coming at us, and today I have the pleasure of having back on um, James Wesley Rawles, who New York Times bestseller, um, literally the guy who coined the term the Great American Redoubt, which I live within and am a proud part of, and also founder of Survival Blog. And really, I wanted to talk with people that I respect and go to for for my information and my inspiration, really, when it comes to being prepared for the storms that may be coming. And James, you've certainly been one of them. Thanks for joining me again.
Thanks for having me on, Jason.
Absolutely. So this year has just been rapid fire nonstop, one thing after another, whether it's terror attacks from radicalized Islamicists, just across the globe. We're seeing the genocide of Christians and just pretty much any non-radicalized Muslim. We've got the election. We've got WikiLeaks. We've got just so much going on. World War III, the specter of World War III looming in the horizon. And really, it gets to a point, especially when you're looking at things like, a Russian invasion, much like Dave Hodges is theorizing about with a multi-prong attack. If something were like that were to happen, being as prepared as a lot of us already are, there's just so much you can do. And really, there comes a point where you can't really prepare much more for it. And talk to us about your thoughts on what's coming, the storms that are coming at us, and how you look at preparing for these things.
Well, I think first and foremost, I think people need to get right with God because we're living in unprecedentedly perilous times. We are living in what I refer to as the age of deception and betrayal. And we cannot, as individuals, control international events. And the current election teaches us that we really don't have that much of a voice even in our own government because we have the choice between, one statist candidate and another statist candidate. So I think it's important to kind of step back, look at the big picture and say, where can I really make a difference? And I think that starts with our prayer lives and how we interact with our own families. We need to redouble our efforts to have truly close-knit families because as perilous times come upon us, it will only be families that are close-knit and that are truly on the same sheet of music, and that should probably be a hymn. It's only going to be those families that hope of being unscathed.
Absolutely. We need to be teaching skill sets to our family members. And then if we don't have them, my daughter, my 10-year-old daughter, Lux, actually yesterday, she's part of the Hunter's Apprenticeship Program here in Montana. And at 10 years old, on her first day ever out, a couple hours in, she took down a monster buck. And now we're teaching her how to, I actually just came in from butchering all day and washed up to do this interview real quick. But we're, teaching her how to cut meat, how to hunt, how to track. All my kids need to know how to hunt and how to defend themselves, just, self-defense. But those are, that's very important. If it wasn't coming from the family, I don't think it would be learned nearly as well. I think you're absolutely right.
Well, thank you. I'm glad we're in agreement on that. Absolutely. It is important that folks be well prepared physically as well. Not spiritual preparedness comes first, but physically, people need to recognize that the government is not always going to be there. The power grid is not always going to be there, and we need to be ready and able to operate as self-sufficiently as possible for an extended period of time. And that means networking with other people. It means stocking up. It means teaming up. It means training up to be ready for whatever comes. And that's what Survival Blog has been all about for the last 11 years, is motivating people to do that, to be as ready as possible.
I think right now is the perfect time. I know in our community here, and we are surrounded with a lot of very like-minded people I would term as preppers. But there's been such division. These people have been doing it for 20 years or so. And, a lot of them came up here to kind of create community, and it unraveled. It fell apart, as oftentimes we see, way too often do we see this happen with groups that are like-minded and agree on 90% of things. It seems like infighting just has a way of just pulling apart that fabric of that community you've tried to build. And now I think is a good time with everything that's going on to reach out and try to rebuild bridges. So I know that we are having some community meetings, neighborhood barbecues before the snow really starts flying, and try to just open lines of communication again with neighbors. That I think, as things get worse, we kind of have an opportunity that we may not have had before to reach out to people that, if we share 60% of the same values, well, maybe we ought to try to figure out ways to get along, because if some of these storms hit, we're going to need that community to get through.
Certainly. And in places like eastern Washington, North Idaho, northwestern Montana, there is definitely a sense of community that most of your listeners probably have never experienced, never lived with. And I highly recommend that people relocate now. If they feel the need to relocate, they shouldn't hesitate any longer. They should get to the American Redoubt as soon as possible and get to know their neighbors very quickly, because it will come down to community. It'll come down to those neighborly relationships that will make the difference between survival and ending up 6 feet under.
It's amazing how similar a lot of the conversations I've been having with neighbors and whatnot just is in the exact same direction. Let's talk a little bit about kind of fostering a survivor's mindset. I would call it more of a warrior's mindset, but more of the warrior in the term of a community protector. In that, with everything we have again coming at us, it's so easy to lose hope, and I think we just need to really foster a mindset. And the only thing I can really relate it to for myself personally is, when I had, in my earlier days than last year, when I had a fight lined up, you have several months to get ready for it. It's called a fight camp, about 3 months that you put in, 5 days, at least a week that you're working out several hours a day. But during that time, you have time to think about, this thing you're going to be locked into a cage with someone. And you really have to develop a mindset and a focus. And I've heard it also kind of paralleled in people who've been through survival situations, and that you really have to kind of just foster a survivor's mindset that you're gonna make it. You don't know how, but you're gonna make it. How important do you think that aspect is?
Well, I think it's important to have a warrior's mindset, that you need to look at yourself not just as an individual or as a family, but for your community, as kind of a sheepdog for your community. You need what I used to refer to in my blog. I haven't mentioned it in recent years, but what I refer to as a community watch, a neighborhood watch on steroids. That's the kind of outlook you need to have with you and your neighbors. And that takes a lot of coordination. It needs common communications and the hardware to make that work. And just generally, keeping your eyes peeled for your neighbors. You're going to be watching for anything that's out of the normal pattern in terms of vehicles passing through your area. It's one thing to have a UPS or FedEx truck come through, but to have some nondescript van pull up to your neighbor's house in the middle of the day when that neighbor is off at work, there should be alarm bells ringing to you, right? For you. It should be, red lights flashing saying, hey, what's really going on here? And for people like you and I, who live in a remote area where a call to the police will probably mean about an average of a 40-minute response time before they get out to a place like ours. In fact, if the deputies on duty are at the other end of the county, it might be an hour and a half.
Yeah, we might be 2 hours if the road is open from the get across the reservoir. So
yeah, so it really is going to come down to you and your neighbors. You need to have that warrior spirit that what Jeff Cooper refers to as the code yellow, code orange outlook at all times. Because if you can't be there to look after your family, you're going to have to depend on your neighbors. And unless you have neighbors you can really trust and you've talked this all through with them and you've worked up the SOPs, you really are at a huge disadvantage. And if you wait until after everything falls apart, it might be too late.
Now, I've certainly seen with everything that's going on, I've had people calling me from outside our group wanting to suddenly plug in. And I'm sure that that's happening elsewhere where, people are very quickly trying to put together, a group for mutual support in a time of crisis. What do people need to look out for? What are some of those hard lessons learned that you would recommend people be wary of in a situation like this where, you feel the pressure of outside events happening and you want to get something put together, but you got to go about it the right way? What are your...
You need to keep OPSEC in mind. You don't want to reveal too much about yourself, your preps, even your level of training until you really know you can trust someone, because that information could be turned around and used against you. You also have to recognize that for every individual that you meet who's actually going to pitch in and help and be there when everything hits the fan, there's probably going to be 2 or 3 others who are just basically going to sit around and watch and see what happens, not really be involved, and really can't be depended upon in any given neighborhood. It's just human nature. There's always going to be the guy at the tiller of a ship. There's going to be guys pulling oars, some of them pulling hard and some not as hard as others. And then there's just going to be the passengers. They're not going to be pulling oars at all. So you just have to recognize human nature for what it is and invest your time in those neighbors, in developing those relationships with the people you can really count on. And those are primarily going to be people who have a background either in the military, in law enforcement, or in emergency services. It's just that simple, because people tend to gravitate toward those professions because they really are sheepdogs rather than sheep. Absolutely.
Now, I've also run into some people, and this is, I guess, I would call it a personal pet peeve. It is my own personal belief that training is essential, real life training, getting out there in the field, getting hands-on, always being a student, always learning. And I know that we've had people who want to come plug in that literally have told me that I'm wasting my time doing real world training from, people that are special forces, the real deal, the guys I would coin alpha warriors that have been out there and have had a career of doing whatever skill set is they're teaching. And I want to go learn from those people hands-on. And I run into people that feel that that's almost a waste of time, that you can get everything you need from reading a book or even worse, watching YouTube videos. And they use it as a way to say you're kind of just, reinventing the wheel. And I literally had to ask someone, are you being serious with what you're telling me right now? Because I couldn't believe that they weren't joking. Do you run into that? Is that?
Yeah, I do. There's people who think they can learn to either be, a Krav Maga master or an MMA fighter or an expert pistol shooter by watching YouTube videos. They're just absolutely deluding themselves. There's a lot of just, in fact, there's also a lot of really bad training that's going on by people who are essentially armchair commandos. So you've got to be aware of who you're dealing with in order to get the best training, and also recognize that even if you end up going to a class and you have more experience than the instructor in some areas, there's always something to be learned if they are decent trainers. So we also need to learn to humble ourselves when we do attend training, and we can't go in with a mindset that we already know it all, because we don't.
No, we've always got to be learning. I know I do. How do you vouch for the, if someone comes to you and asks, hey, is this guy legit? This guy's putting on this class here. What are the best ways for people to kind of go and check them out and try to figure out whether or not they're legit?
If they have any military experience at all, ask to see their DD-214. That's their military service record. And there's a lot of people out there who are, fake Green Berets, fake Navy SEALs. In fact, I'd say there's probably more fake Navy SEALs out there than there are real ones. So ask to actually see their DD-214. And if they're not willing to show you that, or at least a redacted copy of that, where they'll photocopy it, they'll black out certain items, black out their social security number and, a few other items like that, and then re-photocopy that and hand it to you. If they're not willing to hand you that, I would beware. Because, again, there's a lot of just plain fakery out there. There's a lot of puffed up egos and a lot of padded resumes out there that don't reflect reality. For anyone who is, say, a firearms instructor, you need to find out what classes they have attended, and whether they attended as students or whether they attended to take instructors training, which is substantially different. It's similar, but substantially different. And when it comes down to medical training, of course, you want to make sure that you're dealing with medical professionals and ones that have real-world hands-on experience, not theoretical experience. You want to train with, for example, EMTs and paramedics that have been in the field recently, because all of those skills are perishable skills.
Yeah, you've got to keep staying sharp. So you have been one of my favorite authors, and certainly I'm always reading. I'm just finishing up volume 3 of Matt Bracken's Enemies, Foreign and Domestic. I know that there's just been a huge influx of writers in that sort of survivalist genre.
Yes.
Who do you read? When you read something, whether it's survivalist or not, who are the people you're reading right now?
Well, I actually try to avoid reading other survivalist authors because I don't want to subconsciously end up echoing them. I actually have read some of Matt Bracken's books, only because they were so compelling I had to pick them up. But in terms of the thriller genre, I like people like Joel Rosenberg. In the survivalist realm, I'd say that, I try not to read too much of it, but people like Matt Bracken are quite good. In terms of military fiction, I tend toward people like Ralph Peters, for example, or the classic Tom Clancy, who passed away. But just keep in mind that fiction is fiction, and a lot of authors like me now try to squeeze a lot of practical, tactical tips into a fictional storyline. But just keep in mind that people need to be able to divide fiction from reality. And often fiction writers like myself will actually show some bad examples. I try to intentionally include them as to point out lessons learned of people making bad decisions and showing how and why those were bad decisions as a teaching tool. But unfortunately, there's a lot of authors out there that are putting out advice, in effect, through their fictional storylines, often for the sake of drama, that is not good advice. In the survivalist world, there's a lot of these roving ninja kind of guys who just seem to go from gunfight to gunfight. And if anyone were actually to try to operate that way, they'd end up at room temperature very quickly. The safest thing to do is to hunker down in one location with friends and neighbors of like faith that you can really trust. Wandering around from ambush to ambush is just a great way to end up dead.
Yeah, there seems to be almost a resurgence of what I would call prepper pirate fiction, which I think is just awful too, because it's just not going to wind up very well for these guys.
Yeah, I have to agree there. Yes, and that also displays a lack of morality as well.
So, you talked earlier about getting to the Great American Redoubt, and obviously there's been a huge influx with that. There's been articles written with the New York Times. I think I saw one on Washington Post. Just a whole lot of media attention.
Yes.
And a lot of people just going there organically. I didn't even know what the redoubt was until I got up here and kind of plugged in. But God had put it on my heart that if I was going to get up here and get plugged into a community, I needed to go then.
Yep.
So,
and I hear that same story over and over again from a lot of people who'd never heard of the American Redoubt, but just felt drawn here. They just say it's a God thing.
It really was. And I got to say, God seems to work perfectly, because I don't think I would have had the time to plug in to the communities that I have and just the blessings that I've gotten with that if I hadn't gone when I did. But for those that are right there kind of on in that place now where God's put it on their heart to get out and relocate, what's the best way to approach it for someone who's never been to this area whatsoever? Are there resources you would suggest? Do they just come out and just...
First, Jason, it's important that people recognize that it's not too late to relocate. And if they truly trust God, God will put them in the right place at the right time with the right people to his glory and for his purposes. And if people feel convicted by the Holy Spirit to move to the American Redoubt, they should do so as soon as possible, without hesitation, and trust in God that they'll find work and that they'll end up with neighbors that they can trust. And regardless of where you go in the Redoubt, odds are you are going to end up with neighbors that are trustworthy. For people who are just moving up here, I would recommend that they get involved with homeschooling groups. There's a number of homeschooling co-ops. There's programs like Classical Conversations for people with the classical model for their kids. Homeschooling is very important, and you will find some of the best like-minded people in homeschooling groups that you could ever imagine. There's also in the Inland Northwest a very large home church movement. Wherever you live, wherever you move, I suggest that you ask around and find out not just about organized churches with regular church meeting places, but also home churches. And again, some of those people that you'll meet, both Christians and Messianic Jews, are some of the absolutely most trustworthy people you'll ever want to encounter.
That seems to be really growing like wildfire. I can tell you this, many of my friends have gone from, some very kind of well-known churches and broken off and just started doing the home churching, and man, they can't say enough good things about it. They really, really think they've found their place there.
Right. The other networking possibilities are farmers markets, which meet. A lot of them are winding down right now in the Inland Northwest, obviously, but even here in the Inland Northwest, a lot of the farmers markets have kind of one last gasp holiday get together each year. Sometimes as late as December. Usually it's in November. but I would recommend that people get involved in farmers market groups. And the other would be your local volunteer fire department or volunteer ambulance service. Again, you're going to meet some of the most amazing people imaginable with incredible skill sets. I mean, here we are out in the middle of nowhere, and you volunteer with a local volunteer fire department, and you find out after you joined that one of the members of that VFD is prior special forces. Or you'll find out that that a member of that volunteer fire department is actually a retired emergency room doctor who just wants to keep his skills up. They're amazing organizations, and I highly recommend that people get involved. And it's through organizations like that, and of course your local shooting club or whatever, but it's organizations like that where you're going to make friendships that will last a lifetime.
And again, the type of people that are involved with those organizations, for me, I'm in the end section of getting into the search and rescue team here. I had to go through all the background checks and whatnot. One of the people that are part of our community, our neighbors, is on the ambulance team here. And really, it's just, these are the first responders. These are the people that the community already looked to in a time of a crisis. So when something even bigger happens, well, those are the people that are going to be, you're going to be communicating with to help figure out how to keep that community together.
They'll be the people you can really trust to keep their heads in a frantic situation. Because these are people, like you mentioned, volunteer ambulance service. These are people who've rolled out to accident sites time and time again and have been in blood up to their elbows and learned how to work through those situations without panicking. I mean, who better than that?
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to wind it up with this last question. What, out of all the storms we have on the horizon, we just have so many, the whole Russian specter, the cyber attacks happening today, what's happening with Deutsche Bank, the economy, we've got the radical Muslim influx through the refugees, just so many things, open borders. What is it that kind of God's got on your heart right now that you're watching especially close, and give us some ideas as far as how people might be able to get ready for that?
Well, the threats that we're facing are manifold. They're almost too numerous to count, and the permutations of possible outcomes are too many for us to count, certainly. So it all comes down to faith and friends. And I recommend that people keep a close watch on current events, but that they don't allow them to push them to the point of paralysis. You need to just keep on keeping on. This is fall of the year, and this is the time of year where everyone should have already stacked their firewood, stacked their hay, filled their larders, and just be hunkered down and ready for winter. And this year, I think it's doubly important that people be well prepared and do a couple of extra steps this year. Find every fuel can you have and fill it. Every propane tank you have and fill it. And have your septic tank pumped, because you may not, if things really fall apart, you may not have the opportunity to pump your septic tank again for 5 or 6 years. So it's really time to stock up and take stock of our own situations. And again, pray and trust in God.
All right, Jim. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today, and I appreciate all your insight. Just man, I love the fact that I can pick your brain every now and then. So thank you for that.
Thank you, and God bless you, and thank you for all that you've done in the movement.
I'm just doing what I can, and really, I do that for my children. If I don't do it, it's going to be an even bigger mess that they're going to get. So, all right. Well, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jason. God bless you and your listeners.
All right.